In advance of this ceremony, I asked the architect of the Capitol if he would please allow me to fly a flag over the Capitol in Washington, D.C. for the purpose of commemorating this event. So if I could have John Cogan, our Veterans Officer, come forward. Sir, this is the flag of the United States of America. This is to certify that the accompanying flag was flown over the United States Capitol at the request of Honorable Stephen F. Lynch, Member of Congress. This flag was flown over the United States Capitol on May 23, 2012, in honor of Lieutenant Colonel Tommy Stewart, U.S. Army, in recognition of his selfless service and dedication to the Massachusetts Army National Guard and the United States of America. So, sir, I present you the flag. And sir, I present you to this flag. God bless you.
Certainly wasn't expecting that. Ladies and gentlemen, the town of Walpole is just amazing. I grew up here, and I love coming back to Walpole. You have one of the most amazing veterans reps here, John Cogan. He does Walpole a lot of pride, and we have deep respect for him in the military circles. You're very lucky, and Congressman Lynch, thank you very much for your flag.
To introduce to you Representative Dan Winslow.
Thank you, John. I'm honored to share the podium today with Congressman Lynch. We're very lucky to have him and his passion that he brings to representing all of us in the United States Congress. I'm also proud to stand here on behalf of my friend Andy Basevich, who we lost, made the ultimate sacrifice, and also to stand with you to remember all of the people who sacrificed their lives for our country. Combat-related deaths in Afghanistan, 1,435. In Iraq, 3,542. In Vietnam, 47,424 Americans. In Korea, 33,686. In World War II, 291,557 men and women. Tens of thousands more lost in other conflicts, and hundreds of thousands of more injured or wounded in battle. They made the sacrifice on behalf of their country. Before coming here today, I looked up the word sacrifice on dictionary.com, the meaning of the word sacrifice. And sacrifice is defined as the destruction of something prized or desirable for the sake of something considered as having a higher or more pressing claim. The destruction of something prized or desirable for the sake of something considered as having a higher or more pressing claim. What could possibly have a higher or more pressing claim than human life? In our society, in our democracy, it's freedom. These men and women gave their lives for our freedom. They did not want to die. No one wants to die, but they did not want us to live under tyranny or oppression. Their sacrifice, their gift to us, was the gift of our freedom. And our gift to them is to never, ever forget. Thank you.
Good day to Brian Connor, Friends of the 182nd.
Thank you, John. Lieutenant Colonel Stewart, to those that know him well, Tommy, as he said earlier, grew up in Walpole with me. We worked together for the Recreation Department here 25 years ago. And now I'm back with my wife Helen and our two daughters, Olivia and Sophia, living in Walpole. And in staying in touch with Tommy over the years, we learned about 2 years ago he was going to be the commanding officer of the 182nd that would deploy for a year to Afghanistan. He would be responsible for the lives of 700 soldiers, a daunting task, and the inspiration of watching what he does on a daily basis led Helen and I to create FF 182, Friends and Family of the 182nd, to try to support those soldiers while they're away. And there's actually a few of the kids here today that helped us do that, and we'd like to recognize them later. But those special kids inspired us to support Tommy and his men. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce Tommy so you can hear from him. Come on up, Tommy.
Congressmen, representatives, town selectmen, invited guests, ladies and gentlemen of Walpole. It's certainly my honor and privilege to have been invited to participate in Walpole's Memorial Day ceremony today. This is the same one that I attended as a young boy growing up in Walpole. But back then I only had a small understanding of what Memorial Day really was. The people of the town of Walpole have an exemplary tradition of patriotic service that dates back to the American Revolution, and it transcends through our nation's history to service in Iraq and Afghanistan. Walpole has provided more than its share of soldiers, and its patriotic citizens have directly supported their efforts, and that's evident by the mobilization of the Friends and the Family of the 182nd Infantry. Less than 60 days ago, I returned from a year-long deployment to Afghanistan, where I served as the battalion commander of the 182nd Infantry Regiment out of Melrose. A group called the Friends and Family of the 182nd Infantry, FF 182 for short, deployed right along with us. They deployed with their projects here in Walpole that supported our efforts overseas. FF 182 was comprised of Walpole students and their parents, high school faculty, and the faculty of the other schools in Walpole, Johnson Middle School and the elementary schools. They also received many support from local businesses. My unit's mission was to provide security in Afghanistan. However, FF 182 was created by Brian and Helen Connor to assist us in our voluntary humanitarian outreach in the poor villages where we operated. This past winter, FF 182 provided our unit with over 300 backpacks loaded with school supplies that we distributed to the local girls' schools that were under-resourced in our area. Along with that, we received countless boxes of warm clothes. Most of it said Walpole Rebels across the front. I'm going to tell you a quick funny story about that. Well, last February was some tough times for us and throughout Afghanistan. And we were met with some pretty violent demonstrations all through the streets, to include right in front of our base, that we had to make some pretty quick decisions on. These weren't insurgents, they were local Afghans for the most part. So one morning I woke up, probably the morning of February 23rd, right in the middle of it all, and I go into my battalion operations center to get my morning update of how things are progressing. One of my captains tells me, "Sir, it's not good. Thousands of people are outside burning tires, and they're causing a huge melee." And with this very slick smile on his face, he said, "They're wearing Walpole Rebels shirts, sir." They really weren't. But, you know, even in the middle of the thick of things, it's kind of funny, the brotherhood we have where humor presents itself and we take full advantage of it every chance we can. So I'm going to get into a little bit of history. It's going to be quick because I know how history goes with most people, but I just think this is absolutely amazing, and I wish I had known this when I was a kid growing up in Walpole, so I'm going to say it. So I'm going to run some names by you, and you can figure out what they all have in common. Baker, Boyden, Bullard, Ellis, Fisher, Gay, Gould, Hartshorn, Kendall, Page, Plimpton, and Robbins. Anybody know? The names of streets in Walpole, right? They definitely are streets in Walpole, but they're the names of men that served in the American Revolution. They all came from Walpole. And it's just amazing when you ride around Walpole and you look at some of these buildings and you look at Boyden School, who would have known? But if you look into it, Boyden had 16 Boydens served in the American Revolution. 16 of them. Baker, 2 men, brothers named Abel and Ziba. They were in Concord on April 19, 1775. Amazing men that heard the call. And if you remember that date, do we have any teachers here, by the way?
Shot heard around the world.
There you go, shot heard around the world of the American Revolution. We started that. We started it. We start all the trouble around here, don't we? Who were they commanded by? This is amazing. Everybody knows what Bullard Street is? I had friends that lived on Bullard Street, and I spent countless afternoons up there playing baseball and breaking windows in the backyards up there. Bullard, there were 4 Bullard brothers. The most prominent is Colonel Seth Bullard, a great leader from Walpole that played a huge role in service to our nation during the American Revolution. Now bear with me, I'm getting some information that I researched here. I'm going to read it because it's amazing. But in 1760, Seth Bullard was a teacher in Walpole. In 1773, 13 years later, he was an ensign in the Walpole Company of the militia. He was a pretty smart guy. He taught in the Walpole schools, right? So they selected him to be the one that drew up the report of grievances against England. So he represented Walpole's grievances back then. In 1774, he was delegated by Walpole to meet Thomas Cushing, one of the delegates to the Continental Congress in Philadelphia. That was a big deal back then. He paid them a sum of money for patriotic uses. I couldn't find out what that was, but it mentioned patriotic uses, and I trust that's what it was used for. In November 1774, he was chosen as one of the Committee of Inspection to see that Walpole people lived up to the Patriotic Covenant. And he'd be very proud of you all today. Back then, the covenant had more to do with what kind of tea they were drinking than anything. He'd be very proud of Walpole citizens today for everything you've done for us. In 1773, while teaching school in Walpole, he worked to inspire the patriotism among young men and became a leader of Walpole's militia. And he drilled them so that they were ready for April 19, 1775. At a time where he heard the call, he rallied his men of Walpole and they marched to Concord, toward Concord, Lexington, but they ended up at Roxbury Neck, where they hold the British up for 3 months. So that element of the British could not do any more damage than they had done. He subsequently became a Walpole selectman, and then he went with Washington's army to New York. And the interesting thing about that is the 182nd Infantry has 2 New York battle streamers. And I used to tell everyone that it was from 2004 and 2007 when we went to war against the New York Yankees and won, but it's not from that. It's from right around 1777 and 78. Seth Bullard was there. Walpole has made significant contributions to the freedom that we sometimes take for granted. The patriotism of First Lieutenant Andrew Basovich of Walpole, who made the ultimate sacrifice in Iraq in May of 2007, is not much different than First Lieutenant Andrew Willett, who served under Colonel Bullard throughout the American Revolution. Both men of character that served for something greater than themselves. I'm going to bring up 3 names of soldiers lost from the 182nd Infantry in Afghanistan. 2 of them were during my tour. 1 of them was about 2 years prior. First Sergeant Kevin DuPont was a good friend of mine, and he and I worked together in counter-drug years ago. And I saw him about 4 days before he deployed in our state headquarters. Ran into him, typical man hug, you know. And Kevin, what's going on, man? Why are you doing this right now? Kevin had 19 years and 6 months of active federal service. He had 6 months to go to get a full military retirement and to do what he liked to do best, hunt deer. Kevin went over to Afghanistan and he came back pretty beaten up. He was involved in an IED. He got burned real bad and he ended up in Texas in the Burn Institute. That was in March of 2009, and Kevin passed on June 17th, 2009. Sergeant Edward Grace. Here's a man that I deployed with that found out in this past September that he was in stage 4 cancer. He had made it through all the mobilization work we did. He made it through everything. And most of all, he worked for an officer that was is a Navy SEAL. And the Navy SEAL that commanded that platoon, he put them through the regular Navy SEAL workouts. And Sergeant Grace did all that, all with stage 4 cancer, until one day something was definitely wrong. And it turns out stage 4 cancer. In October of 2011, 1 month after I met up with him at Bagram Air Base in Afghanistan, Sergeant Grace died. Sergeant Grace had told me before he died, he said that he'd be back with his platoon in Ghazni province. And at that point, he didn't know how bad his cancer really was. He's buried at Arlington National Cemetery. Staff Sergeant George Oliveira deployed with us. He was a member of a platoon in Paktia. And this is real interesting because that platoon went on a patrol to go to a village to check on a road that they had built for the Afghans, to just do a quick quality control visit. And his platoon commander walked out in front of the group to go check on the road. And Sergeant Oliveira said, "Wait up, sir. You don't go first. I go first. I protect you. Fall in back of everybody." Sergeant Oliveira went first, all right. He went up around the vehicles and an IED went off. And Sergeant Oliveira lost his life that day. If those 3 men were sitting in these 3 vacant seats right here in front of you, right now, and I was to tell them what their destiny would be, I guarantee you that all 3 would look at each other, they'd be quiet for a while, and they'd ask me one question: "Sir, was I doing my job?" And I'd tell each of them, "Yeah, you were. You were doing your job." And they could find some solitude in that, and they could rest with their fate. In the military, we have a saying: a unit that does not honor its fallen has no honor. Given everything that the citizens of Walpole have traditionally sacrificed for our nation, Walpole is a town that's full of honor. Today, I have a greater appreciation for Memorial Day, and I can actually match faces to names, and some of those names to the town streets in Walpole. Today is certainly a day to spend with your family and having cookouts and the like. It's also a day to honor the significant sacrifices of men and women that joined the service, knowing there would be some sacrifice, hoping it would not be the ultimate sacrifice, but in the name of our nation and our freedom, able to accept it if it should come. The people of Walpole are truly commended for upholding their memory and their honors. Thank you very much.